Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. We're on episode number 22 today. We're going to talk a little bit about replacement heifer management. I'm Morgan Hayes. I'm an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering at the University of Kentucky, and focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky here with about 500 acres, and we have a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering, focusing on precision livestock farming. In my personal life, I raise registered Angus cattle with my family, and we also focus on some hay production.
Okay, Josh. So what's been happening on the farm? I know last week we touched briefly on it, but we had special guest Matt Dixon, and we had lots to talk about with the weather. What's been really happening on the farm?
Oh, we've had a couple of really good days. So we did a lot of repair and maintenance this weekend. So we actually got our big cutter up and going again. So I had to replace throttle cable. So it's about 10 foot of throttle cable. And then also just moving around cows, still putting out a little bit of hay. I have my one group of my fall cows. I still have them on hay. I think everything is ready to pretty much put them out there and be ready to rotate. But I'm just going to give them one more week. Try to take some down my current hay supplies down as much as I can. And then go ahead and start rotating. So I should have ample forages at this point for them to just be able to rotate throughout the field. So I have at least a 5 pasture rotation.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, we're into hay rotation into pasture rotation already. We do have all of our animals out on grass. I suspect this last cold snap the last couple of days here might slow down the grass a little bit, but I think we'll be in pretty good shape. We might feed a roll or two just after they finish the first cycle just to hold them back before we put them out again. Although grass really shot out of the ground last week, and so I think we might actually be okay. We might not need to worry about that, but we'll find out in about a week or two whether or not we started a little early or not. I certainly see some people that have animals out there that look like they've already eaten down everything, and they're still looking like they're not going to put out more hay. So I'm thinking I'm doing better than some people, although maybe it's still not a perfect solution that we're at right now. Aside from that, we put up a little bit of fence wire over the weekend. Still figuring out the final hay deliveries from last year. We're at the point now where we need our barns empty, and finding that balance. Not the hay that we are storing for ourselves for next year, but anyone who pre-purchased hay and hasn't yet picked it up. We're at the point in the year where those people need to either pick up their hay or we need to have a strategy to get it out of our barns.
Right.
Or if we're going to carry it over, there's a cost associated with that, right? If we're going to carry over hay for another year, that either we need to utilize that hay somewhere else in our operation, or if we're storing it for them for another year, if it's a large enough volume, we need to get the right cost associated with storing it for another year, because that's hay that we can't put back into the barns.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a balancing act at this point, just figuring out where people want hay, how they want to handle it. Some people had really good years. They were able to graze late in the fall, and they didn't use their full supply. But most people did a pretty good job anticipating their hay. But I have like a few folks that have like 40 rolls left over, and that's a pretty large amount of hay for us to hold for them for another year. 8 or so or 10 is not a huge problem, but 40 is a pretty significant.
Couple rolls in your barn there.
It's a pretty significant amount. Our barns typically hold about 2 to 250, so 40 is not an insignificant amount of space in a barn to have to hold over. So we'll have to make some decisions about how they want to handle that hay. That it is their hay. We just have to decide where they want us to place it,
right,
or how they want us to handle that. So all of that to figure out in the next couple weeks. But all of that's sort of been our goal right now, is getting all of that done.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge trying to figure out just logistically, I guess.
Exactly. And so that's all going fairly well right now, but there's certainly dynamics, and people have other priorities too. It's that time of year where there's a lot going on their farms as well. So getting all of that coordinated.
Yep, doing the vaccination because you guys have just done your preg testing last week, I believe.
Yeah, we did pregnancy testing about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and then we also vaccinated all of our weaned calves, our fall calves that are weaned and in the barn right now. So they got their vaccines and another weight. So we're seeing how they're handling weaning because they are now 45 days out from being weaned. So we're at a point now where we're getting ready to sell those fall calves. Grass is coming on. Here, first week or two of May is our typical goal time for selling those. So just making sure we know which animals we want to keep and which ones we want to sell.
They should be able to move fairly quickly, I guess, considering everything. So, I guess with the grass being green, everything seems to be greening up fairly nicely, being productive. So,
yeah, I think that's true. I think the cattle are doing pretty well. The market is decently strong. There's been some weaker and stronger weeks in the last couple, but I think overall the market is okay right now for selling calves. We have a few we're going to keep back to feed for processing, steers, and then we have a few heifers we're going to keep back, which sort of
leads into our topic
today, which is managing our heifers in the summer season. I think in the winter season, heifers generally get a little extra feed, a little extra attention just to make sure that they're doing what they need to. But just want to talk a little bit about how you manage your heifers in the summer. Are they part of your main group of cows that they're going to go in and breed with? I'm mainly talking, at least for us, about our heifers that are going in. We can talk about both heifers that you might have coming into your spring group that are going to breed here in June, as well as heifers that you're going to try to breed in the fall.
So so we have it kind of as two distinct groups right now. So our heifers for the fall. So we just moved. We sent a bunch of steers off 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, we sent about 20 of our steers off. Got a couple more still got to send off, and then we have all of our heifers. So with all of our heifers, or our fall heifers, we'll typically take them on a farm, and I have a rotation scheme set up where I rotate them through about 3, if you consider maybe 4 pastures, depending on how you consider. And so they're separate by themselves, and we typically try to, they don't really get any supplementation. They get their mineral, but they don't get any feed supplementation because they're usually on fairly decent stands. So it'll be a clover, fescue, orchard grass mix. So we'll rotate through those 3 or 4 pastures. And that's just primarily for the heifers. They're just there, and similar with our spring group, is we'll have them in a separate paddock as well, and we'll try to make sure they are on fresh grass or good high quality grasses and forages. We'll typically, I'll even just throw 1 bale from the previous year. I'll just throw a bale out there just so it's available. If they want to tear it up, they can. If they want to eat it, they can. But it's generally, we're just trying to go out there and monitor how much they've actually grazed down, and then just keep rotating them. So really try to push, we'll have about 20 heifers, push the numbers on there, have them graze down a section fairly well, then move them on to the next.
Yeah, so we sort of do something similar. We do keep our heifers separate from our cow herds. Our heifers that will go in for breeding in the spring group, the ones that are already sort of size that we've just recently weighed, and we can confirm that they are the size we want for breeding, they will go in with our calving ease bull on high quality grass. Usually they will be understocked. It's just typically that this group tends to understock, so they tend to have the choicest of grasses because they tend to have numbers that just don't quite meet up to the acreage that's available. And it's just sort of the nature of the farm that they're on. It's a 40-acre farm, and we don't typically have enough heifers in that group. Sometimes we'll bring in also some very old cows. So if we have senior cows that are 12, 13, 14 years old, sometimes we'll bring them over, even though we recognize that the bull that they're breeding to is maybe not going to give the same growth. We'll go ahead and breed a couple extra animals to that bull in order to give those cows that need the extra nutrition a little bit better grass options. So that group is currently out in that rotation scheme. That farm also typically holds our bulls. So we're very careful not to put our young heifers onto this farm. That would be a perfect spot to actually put our young heifers, but because we tend to store our bulls there when they're not in season, if we got a bull that jumped a fence early, I wouldn't feel too bad that my heifers got bred now versus if my young heifer that I'm trying to breed in the fall got bred now, I'd be very upset.
Yeah. Yeah, very.
So this is sort of our strategy to just try and get a couple extra animal numbers on there and just kind of manage them that way. Our other group of heifers, the ones that will go into the fall group, they also have sort of similar to you. They sometimes have a smaller acreage that they get a rotation within. So they're getting put onto temporary fencing to rotate a larger pasture that's sort of isolated from our cow group.
Okay.
They might get moved around a little bit, though. That group tends to get a little bit more flexibility. We will feed them, though, this summer. So we will not feed our group that's going in with the bull. They're already at size. But our other group will get supplemental feed at least 3 times a week. And it's partly to make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need, and to put on weight the way we want them to, but it's also partially just to get them to come up and be friendly, because we're just trying to make sure we get really good, calm, normal behavior that we want, and that these are the younger heifers that haven't been in rotation very much other than as a calf with their mother. And to make sure that they rotate the way we want to, we call them with feed.
Okay.
So it's just part of our style of management, just to make sure that we don't have to fight to get animals to rotate. So feed is a good incentive for me and apparently the cows.
And so you mentioned it, like, so we got these replacement heifers. And so, you mentioned like the older cows. How old do you keep your cows? So we replace, these replacement heifers are to replace some of these cows. How old do you keep them? Is there like some kind of guideline you use, or you just kind of look at the phenotype of the animals and see how their feet and legs are moving, their teeth? Mm-hmm. What are you looking for to say, you're out of here?
A little bit how the calves are doing, a little bit on the how the animal is structurally. All of the cows that I said are older are structurally still sound, and they've all had calves that have made weight. We're not keeping animals that aren't making weight, but we have some genetics that we like. They were purebred Solir genetics, which is the basis of our herd. They're framey, big cows.
Yep.
And they've done remarkably well. They had calves last fall that weaned in the high fours. So they're doing fine, which is not always easy to do on a fall calving cycle. Especially when they're in the mud and stuff, it's not always easy for them to have bigger calves. But they've had decently large calves at weaning, compared to the size of our group overall. So they get to stay in the herd for right now. We have one that I think is questionable, but she's bred. So she is currently still in the herd.
Just keep an eye on her.
We're keeping an eye on her, and the reality is we might get the calf out of her, and we may have to make a decision to wean it early.
Wean it 3 months or something.
Something like that, and sell her, or process her, do something with her, depending on how she's doing. But at the end of the day, the market is good for cull cows right now, but it's not good enough to sell a bred cow that keeps putting out a calf that's 450 or more.
Yeah.
It's a real struggle actually when they're able to get rebred. You assume at certain points they're not going to rebreed because they're not going to be able to maintain body condition in order to do it. So when they're able to do that and structurally they're sound.
Yep, as long as they're sound.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 keys. We currently have, this is embarrassing. I don't know why I even admit any of this on record, but we have a pet steer at the house, and Tiny is, he's like I don't know what he is. It's crazy. But anyway, we have Tiny at home, the pet steer. Tiny is not structurally sound. He is at the end of his lifespan, but it is a pet, and you have to make decisions about when to end life for quality of life, and you make that decision differently than you do if you're deciding which cow to keep as a productive member of a herd.
Right.
So we usually do a better job, but I won't say that we always make the perfect decisions because I will say that we currently have a steer that isn't productive at all, that is not structurally sound, and he's still living and getting plenty of feed. So I'm not going to suggest that we're making perfect decisions on this farm.
Realize there's a paradox.
We understand that we have a pet and we have a cow herd that we are rearing for a business enterprise, I guess. So I don't know how else to explain it other than it is a little bit of a personal decision and then also a moral one. I mean, if you've had a cow that's 13 or 14, you may give it some latitude if it's bred.
Yep.
And I'm willing to put them in a group where I give them a little extra feed or something like that to keep them in condition. I'm not necessarily willing to have them up by themselves.
Yes.
And I'm not necessarily willing to keep them if I think they're in pain or unable to maintain mobility. That's not acceptable to me personally, but I also want to be fair to the animal if they've been there for 13 years, that we don't just get rid of them because they're 13. The age in and of itself is not a decision maker.
I've talked to a couple producers, going across the state, and they say, some have said like 10 years old, boom, they're done. We have on our farm, we kind of are a little more flexible. And so as long as they're aggressive eaters, as long as they're productive, kind of like what you had, there's been probably 2 this past year that we kept that probably they were on the borderline last year, and we kept them, and they had a little bit of feet and legs. They would be fine over the summer, but as soon as they calve, you start to see those feet and leg problems come up over the winter time.
Yeah.
And so this winter, they were like the one cow, she was really struggling. I was like, why did we keep her? And then we weighed the calf, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. So she weaned, ours was about 500-pound average. Hers was 652-pound bull.
Yep.
And so for that one, I was like, okay, I understand why we kept her, because she had a lot of production. But she would just get down at some point. We did have to call it and say, we're going to send her on to Beef Solutions at that point.
Yep. They do reach a point where they get to the point where it's not fair to keep them.
Yes.
They will be in pain. They won't be able to maintain weight the way they need to. And certainly the fall group struggles with this more, at least on our farm. And I think in general in Kentucky, the fall group tends to have better calves in the fall. Like they start out better, but that mud is really tough. And it's particularly tough on an older cow if they have to stand and walk through mud and nurse a calf.
Yep.
And so you do have to make decisions. We'd actually prefer to have our older animals on our spring cycle, but they end up where they end up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're not willing to hold them that extra 6 months to put them onto the cycle you want. And sometimes they just keep rebreeding and you never can get them over there. So I do have 1 or 2 that we would like to keep, but if we can't get them to switch from a fall to a spring, they're probably going to have to leave after this year. So currently this summer, they're really enjoying good grass, and they're going to calve in the fall, and then we'll have to make decisions sometime later into the winter about those couples. So.
Okay. And there's only been 1 or 2, I think we've had to, midway through the winter, we had to wean early. We just had to say enough's enough.
Yeah, it doesn't usually happen for us either. Usually we can get them through. And we do have some smaller lots that have more gravel and solid areas. So if we had to pull them up to keep the calf on a little longer, it's not the end of the world to do that. But you certainly don't want to create more groups to have to work with. And we already just acknowledged that our heifers are already 2 groups on top of the 2 cow groups.
Yep.
On top of the bulls, on top of the calves that are weaned that we're feeding. So
top of the spring and fall. And so it's always, it's a complicated management strategy. And so at some point you just have to say enough. You have to say,
yep,
enough is enough. We can't micromanage.
Exactly. And so for us, the only real solution is we either keep those cows in with the herd, possibly we put them in with heifers that get a little bit better nutrition than the cows, or it's time for them to leave. I think it's just sort of our general approach. I don't know that that's a universal suggestion that I would give to other people, but it matches sort of our value system, I think, on the farm, which is okay. I don't think we're outrageously sentimental about them, but I also don't think it's unfair to be slightly sentimental about your animals when you spend that much time with them.
Yeah, that's true. Our oldest cow at some point was Alexa, and she was 18 years old, but she kept breeding every year.
Yep.
Every year she bred, and she was a half Holstein, half Angus, and we had her for years, but she could walk, and she'd throw a calf, and she could raise a calf. So at some point we did sell her because she might not, she was always good, but I was like, well, we'll go ahead and sell her before there's an issue.
Yeah.
At 18.
It does hurt to have, and we had last year a couple major structural issues with bulls, and then we actually had a cow the winter before that had a structural issue, not because of age, just they ended up with some structural issues. And it really is, it's a struggle to decide what to do with an animal when you know that they are not structurally sound, because you don't really want to, at least personally, I don't like sending them to a stockyards knowing that they might go down on a truck.
Yes.
It makes me very uncomfortable to do that. So being able to make that decision about an older cow, we've gone completely off topic on older cows. That is not a replacement heifer topic, but
so I guess, circling back to replacement heifers. I guess when we are weaning, we kind of look at the ones who are above 400 pounds. Who's our heifers at weaning above 400 pounds? Kind of our just general benchmark. Because if we're below that, we can go ahead and just toss them. And then our other benchmark would be, are they minimum? When we get to late October or early November, we weigh them. Are they 700 pounds at that point? And usually we're pushing over that. Usually we're pushing over it pretty good. But if we have ones that are on that line there, we're really starting to scrutinize them, potentially even measuring pelvic area on some of those. We typically have primarily used birth weight, looking at replacement heifers' birth weight as we're figuring out, what bulls do we need to use, low birth weight bulls. But we had a couple big ones this past spring, so we'll probably be a little bit of extra focus on the pelvic area birth weight this year.
Yeah, we have in the past measured pelvic area. It's not something I'm opposed to doing. We also sometimes we certainly weigh our animals at weaning and then again before they go in for breeding. Typically, we like our animals to be 800.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I think people generally want 65% of mature body weight, and our cows just do tend to be framier. We have some Solier and we have some Charolais crosses, and they're just framier animals. Even if they're not heavy, they tend to be a little bit bigger. I just don't feel comfortable usually if they're a lot under 800, unless I know that their mother was small. Like I have what's known as a belted Galloway cross animal, and she's a 1,000-pound animal. If her heifer calf was going to stay in our herd, it wouldn't need to be 800 pounds to breed. In fact, I'd be very scared if it was 800 pounds at breeding. I'd be very comfortable breeding that calf at 700 pounds. But if I know I've got something out of a cow that's 1,400 pounds and that heifer isn't at 800, I might not want to breed her. So that decision is a little bit more based upon her frame as well as her mother's frame.
Okay.
And we just generally, we actually don't use the weight at weaning to make a decision, but we always weigh them at weaning and then again about 30 days later, and then typically one more weight after that. So we can see how their growth is in that first 2 months after weaning. And if we're not getting pounds of gain over like 1.75 on our heifers, we aim for 2 pounds of gain a day on all of our calves, knowing that we're going to send steers out that are going to be on feed. We want to make sure they're on enough feed that they're going to be comfortable when they go to a pushed feed.
Okay.
But we don't want our heifers growing at more than 2 pounds a head a day, so we're not really pushing the calves in the barn. So if our heifers aren't gaining at 1.75, they're not gaining in relation to the feed that we're supplying, they're probably not going to grow on the farm.
Right. So they wouldn't be good fits for your operation.
Yeah, they just don't match the operation. So they have to meet sort of that criteria as well. They have to have good growth post-weaning. Make sure. And then if the mother had terrible milk, that's another hard no on keeping one. So
right.
We have a couple that are actually growing really well right now, but the mother was a terrible milker, and they probably won't stay just by default.
Okay. So that is a factor to consider.
I think the only other factor I can think of is pink eye issues. I don't know if you make note of pink eye, and if something has pink eye, it takes down the chance of them remaining in the herd.
It depends, because some years will be okay, then some years it'll just cover us up and get half the calves, it seems. But the ones who don't have pink eye, it definitely...
It's a positive for them.
A positive for them. It is a positive for them. We do see it. I think it's in the literature. We do see that reduction in gain.
Yep.
Our gain with the pink when they get the pink.
Yeah, I think
they're definitely stressed.
Yeah, I think if I see young calves in the summer with pink eye, and it's only one or two in my group, I usually note who they are, and usually their mother had pink eye as well. So I think there's probably a genetic component to it. I'm not sure exactly what that genetic component is, but we do take that into consideration well so that's something we're sort of watching with those heifer groups. And sometimes that's even heifers that will sell, like bred heifers. If we have too many animals going into our herd and we've got something that had pink eye that summer and we're like, don't want it.
Yeah.
She wasn't a favorite heifer to begin with. We might sell her just because of that. It depends on the herd and the year and a bunch of other things, but
Yeah, because sometimes, we always thought that some of the other cows might be a little more resilient for their immune system.
yep,
So if they are more resilient, we need to keep those.
exactly. There you go. So a lot of different things go into the decision making, a lot of different things go into the management, but I think we have agreement that just generally a higher quality forage, if possible, is sort of a goal for the heifers.
Yeah, generally just trying to take care of them, get them nutritionally sound.
Perfect. Well, let's finish up quickly here with anything that you're planning to do in the next week or so on the farm.
Still have to repair the baler. So the baler still has to be done, and then the other big repair would be a manure spreader. Probably just ordering some new flighting for that one.
Okay.
So hopefully at some point, might be August, but at some point I will spread manure. It might be August.
We did get our manure spreader, our tire back on, and it is functional again. So that is a positive that we got done. We are going to be working on a couple projects this week. Some of them farm related, some of them just general house maintenance type things. And some driveway gravel work needs to happen.
Okay.
I'm hoping we're supposed to get a little bit of rain this weekend, but we have a little bit of dirt work to do. And then, I've said before that we're not doing any fertilizer, but we're just looking out at our pastures right now and making sure as grass is coming in now, if there's anything that we need to address, any fields that really do need a little bit of nitrogen to push them, something that's not started. We're still on the fence on one or two areas specifically, but for the majority, I think we're in pretty good shape.
I think just with this cold here, it just made some of the pastures look kind of patchy to some degree. So it's definitely have to make that decision of spend a whole lot of money or, take a risk almost.
Yep. And so we're going to do some risk management decision making.
All right.
That's what's happening on the farms this week. And we'll be back next week with another podcast. And we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Take care.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.